The First World War was supposed to be short. That was what generals promised, what newspapers printed, and what millions of young men believed as they marched toward the front in the summer of 1914. No one imagined that this conflict would become a grinding industrial slaughter, fought not only with bullets and shells, but with invisible clouds of poison drifting silently across the battlefield. This video reveals how chemical gas was introduced into warfare, how it transformed the experience of soldiers forever, and how it left scars that would last long after the war itself ended. In this video, you will witness real accounts from the trenches, learn how gas weapons were developed and deployed, understand the terrifying physical effects on the human body, and discover how fear itself became one of the most powerful weapons of the First World War. What began as an experiment would evolve into one of the darkest chapters in military history. If you enjoy these war journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought in the comments below. This helps others find their way here too. For now, let's begin our journey. When the war erupted in 1914, combat quickly stalled into a deadlock. Trenches stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border, carving Europe into a scarred landscape of mud, wire, and death. Machine guns made frontal assaults suicidal, artillery pulverized entire regiments, and neither side could break through. Commanders searched desperately for a solution, something, anything that could shatter the stalemate. The answer they turned to was chemistry. Although international conventions like the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907 had explicitly banned the use of poison weapons, the pressures of total war pushed moral boundaries aside. At first, chemical agents were used in small, almost experimental ways. Tear gas grenades appeared early in the war, intended to flush enemy soldiers from trenches. These early attempts were largely ineffective, often failing due to weather conditions or poor delivery systems. But behind the lines, scientists were already working on something far more deadly. Germany took the lead in the development of lethal chemical warfare. Under the guidance of chemists such as Fritz Haber, a Nobel Prize winner and ardent nationalist, the German military explored the use of chlorine gas as a battlefield weapon. Chlorine was cheap, readily available, and devastating to human lungs. Haber argued that gas warfare would shorten the war by breaking enemy resistance. History would prove him tragically wrong. On April 22, 1915, near the Belgian town of Ypres, the world changed. As the sun began to set, German troops opened thousands of steel cylinders along their trench lines. A greenish-yellow cloud rose into the air and drifted slowly toward the Allied positions, carried by a favorable wind. French and Algerian troops watched in confusion as the strange mist approached. Some thought it was smoke meant to conceal an infantry attack. Others were simply curious. Then the gas reached them. Men began coughing violently, their eyes burned, their throats closed. Chlorine gas reacts with moisture in the lungs to form hydrochloric acid, effectively dissolving lung tissue from the inside. Soldiers clawed at their throats, gasping for air that would not come. Many collapsed where they stood. Others ran blindly, their lungs filling with fluid, drowning on dry land. Within minutes, entire sections of the Allied line had ceased to exist. Eyewitnesses later described bodies lying in grotesque positions, faces contorted in agony, uniforms stained with vomit and blood. Survivors stumbled rearward, blinded and choking, spreading panic among troops who had never imagined such a weapon. One Canadian officer wrote that the sight was undescribable, a vision of horror that haunted him long after the war itself. The attack created a massive gap in the Allied line, yet the Germans failed to exploit it fully. Even they were unprepared for the scale of the devastation they had unleashed. Nevertheless, the genie was out of the bottle. Chemical warfare had arrived, and there would be no turning back. News of the gas attack spread rapidly across the front. Fear traveled faster than any cloud. Soldiers now faced an enemy they could not see, smell clearly, or fight back with bullets. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Men slept with constant anxiety, scanning the horizon for strange mists, listening for warnings, knowing that death might arrive silently on the wind. The Allies responded quickly, both with outrage and imitation. At first, protection was crude. Soldiers were instructed to urinate on cloths and hold them over their mouths and noses, the ammonia in urine offering limited protection against chlorine. Improvised masks made of gauze and cotton followed, but they were far from adequate. Panic and confusion often rendered even these useless during sudden gas attacks. Meanwhile, military laboratories in Britain and France raced to develop their own chemical weapons. What had begun as a German innovation became an arms race of poison. By late 1915, gas masks became standard equipment for soldiers on all sides. Early models were uncomfortable, claustrophobic, and prone to failure, but they offered a chance of survival. Soldiers were trained to don them in seconds, even while asleep. Drills became routine. Gas alarms, often simple gongs or rattles, were installed along trench lines. At the first sign of gas, men would scramble to seal their masks, hearts pounding in terror. Yet gas warfare continued to evolve.
Chlorine, while deadly, had limitations. It was visible and dependent on wind conditions. Scientists soon developed more effective agents. Phosgene, introduced later in 1915, was colorless and far more lethal. It smelled faintly of hay or green apples, deceiving soldiers into thinking it was harmless. Often, symptoms did not appear immediately. Men exposed to phosgene might feel fine at first, only to collapse hours later as their lungs failed. One British medical officer described soldiers arriving at aid stations seemingly uninjured, only to die overnight, drowning as fluid filled their lungs. There was little doctors could do. No antidote existed. Treatment was limited to rest, oxygen if available, and prayer. Gas warfare did not replace traditional weapons, it complemented them. Artillery shells filled with gas allowed armies to deliver poison over long distances, regardless of wind. Barrages of gas shells would precede infantry assaults, forcing defenders to wear masks that impaired vision and breathing, making them easier targets. Sometimes gas was used not to kill, but to incapacitate, sow confusion, and break morale. The trenches became laboratories of suffering. Rats fled gas clouds, birds fell from the sky, vegetation withered and died. The battlefield itself seemed poisoned. Soldiers began to describe gas as a living entity, something that crept, waited, and hunted them. Letters home often mentioned gas attacks with particular dread, more feared than artillery or machine guns. As the war dragged on into 1916, chemical warfare was no longer a novelty, it was a grim routine. New agents were introduced, new delivery methods refined. Protective gear improved, but no mask was perfect. A single tear, a faulty filter, or a moment of delay could mean death. And still, the war did not end. By 1916, chemical warfare was no longer an experiment. It had become a calculated instrument of terror, refined through science and repetition. Soldiers on every front now lived with the knowledge that death might arrive not with an explosion, but with a silent breath. Gas masks hung permanently around their necks, sleeping positions were chosen with escape in mind, and the sound of a rattle or shouted warning could turn entire trench systems into scenes of blind panic within seconds. Yet even with all this preparation, nothing could fully prepare the men for what was coming next. In July 1917, near the Belgian town of Ypres, once again, the Germans introduced a new chemical agent that would redefine horror on the battlefield. Unlike chlorine or phosgene, this gas did not announce itself with a dramatic cloud or an immediate choking sensation. It was oily, persistent, and deceptively subtle. Soldiers would come to know it by a name that inspired dread long after the war ended: mustard gas. Mustard gas did not need to kill quickly to be effective. Its true power lay in its ability to maim, blind, and torture. It attacked the skin, eyes, lungs, and digestive system. Even minimal exposure could lead to severe burns and long-term disability. Worse still, its effects were often delayed. Men might walk through a contaminated area without realizing the danger, only to collapse hours later as their blisters formed across their bodies and their vision faded into darkness. Unlike earlier gases, mustard gas lingered. It clung to clothing, soaked into the soil, and contaminated trenches for days or even weeks. Rain did not wash it away. Wind did not disperse it easily. The battlefield itself became a poisoned trap. Medical reports from the time describe soldiers arriving at aid stations with eyes swollen shut, skin covered in yellowish blisters, and lungs inflamed to the point of suffocation. Some men vomited uncontrollably. Others screamed in agony as medics tried to remove contaminated clothing, often tearing skin that had already begun to peel away. One British nurse wrote in her diary that mustard gas victims were the most horrifying patients she had ever seen. She described men blind as stone, stumbling forward with arms outstretched, their faces unrecognizable beneath swollen flesh. Many begged not for treatment, but for death. Gas masks offered limited protection against mustard gas, especially early on. The gas could enter through seams, filters, or even through the skin itself. Soldiers learned too late that standing in a contaminated trench without visible gas could be just as deadly as breathing it directly. Boots filled with mustard gas residue caused chemical burns to the feet. Gloves trapped the substance against the skin. Simply sitting or lying down in the wrong place could lead to crippling injuries. Mustard gas was not designed primarily to kill. In fact, its fatality rate was lower than that of chlorine or phosgene, but this was precisely what made it strategically valuable. A wounded soldier required evacuation, medical care, transportation, and long-term support. Each injured man tied up resources and reduced the fighting strength of entire units. Military planners understood this grim arithmetic. As mustard gas use expanded, casualty clearing stations were overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses worked around the clock, often without adequate protective equipment themselves. Many medical personnel became victims of gas exposure while treating the wounded. Hospitals behind the lines had to establish separate wards for gas casualties, isolating them due to the lingering contamination on their bodies and clothing. Treatment options were painfully limited. There was no cure for chemical burns caused by mustard gas. Care consisted of washing exposed areas with water or mild solutions, applying ointments, bandaging wounds, and managing infections. For eye injuries, doctors could do little more than clean the area and hope that sight might eventually return. In many cases, it never did. Survivors often carried their injuries for life. Gas warfare also reshaped the daily routines of soldiers. Trench discipline became stricter, equipment inspections were constant, masks had to be clean, filters dry, straps intact. Men were punished for carelessness because one soldier's failure could endanger an entire unit. Even so, accidents were common. A poorly fitted mask, a cracked lens, or a moment of hesitation could be fatal. Fear permeated every aspect of trench life. Veterans later recalled that gas attacks produced a unique kind of terror, different from artillery bombardments or infantry assaults. Shelling was violent and loud, but gas was quiet and uncertain. Soldiers described lying awake at night, listening for alarms, imagining gas creeping towards them through the darkness. Some reported phantom smells, mistaking ordinary odors for poison. Others slept with their masks on despite the discomfort, unable to risk vulnerability. This constant tension took a severe psychological toll. Military psychiatrists of the time began documenting cases of what would later be recognized as trauma-related disorders. Soldiers exposed to gas often developed persistent anxiety, nightmares, and panic attacks. Some became obsessed with their breathing, convinced they were suffocating even in clean air. The invisible nature of gas made it uniquely haunting. Unlike a wound you could see, gas left uncertainty in its wake. Letters from the front reveal how deeply gas warfare affected morale. Soldiers wrote home warning loved ones not to believe official reassurances. They spoke of comrades who survived attacks only to die days later. They described the humiliation of being rendered helpless, blinded, or burned without ever seeing the enemy. Meanwhile, gas warfare continued to evolve on all sides. By 1918, both the Allies and the Central Powers possessed vast stockpiles of chemical agents. Gas shells were fired in massive quantities during major offensives, including the German Spring Offensive and the Allied counterattacks later that year. Chemical weapons were integrated into battle plans with chilling precision, used to isolate sectors, deny terrain, and exhaust defenders before conventional assaults. Despite improvements in protective equipment, gas casualties continued to mount. New mask designs offered better filtration and visibility, but they could not fully counter the variety of agents used. Soldiers were forced to fight while wearing masks, their breathing labored, their vision restricted, their voices muffled. Communication suffered, coordination broke down, confusion reigned.
Even animals were not spared. Horses, essential for transportation and artillery movement, were frequent victims of gas attacks. Veterinary units treated animals suffering from lung damage and chemical burns, but many had to be euthanized. The suffering extended beyond humans, reinforcing the sense that gas warfare corrupted everything it touched. As the war approached its final year, the cumulative impact of chemical warfare became impossible to ignore. Millions had been exposed, hundreds of thousands were permanently injured, entire landscapes were contaminated. The promise that gas would shorten the war had proven false. Instead, it had added a new layer of cruelty to an already devastating conflict. And yet, gas warfare did not end with the armistice. Long after the guns fell silent in November 1918, the legacy of chemical weapons continued to haunt survivors. Veterans returned home with damaged lungs, chronic skin conditions, and blindness. Many struggled to work, to breathe, to sleep. Some died years later from complications linked to gas exposure, their deaths uncounted among official wartime casualties. The world had witnessed something unprecedented. Science turned deliberately against the human body on an industrial scale. By the later years of the First World War, poison gas had become an accepted reality of the battlefield. It was no longer spoken of as a shocking innovation, but as a constant threat woven into daily military life. Soldiers learned to live with the expectation that at any moment the air around them could turn hostile. Survival now depended not only on courage or skill, but on discipline, preparation, and the ability to react in seconds. Gas defense became a science born of necessity. Early in the war, protective measures had been improvised and unreliable. By 1916 and 1917, however, military research units across Europe were working relentlessly to improve gas masks, filters, and detection methods. The goal was simple: give soldiers a fighting chance against an enemy they could not see. Gas masks evolved rapidly. Primitive cloth pads soaked in chemicals gave way to full-face respirators with glass eyepieces and replaceable filters. These masks could protect against a range of gases, from chlorine to phosgene, and eventually offered partial defense against mustard gas. Soldiers were drilled repeatedly in their use, trained to don them in complete darkness, under fire, and even while asleep. Time was everything. Reports from the front emphasized that a delay of just a few seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Training manuals stressed muscle memory. Masks were to be kept within arm's reach at all times. Any soldier caught without his mask during an attack risked not only his own life, but those of his comrades. Units conducted surprise gas drills, triggering alarms without warning to test readiness. Despite these efforts, gas masks were deeply resented by the men forced to wear them. They were hot, restrictive, and uncomfortable. Breathing through the filter required effort, especially during combat. Vision was distorted by fogging lenses. Voices were muffled, making communication difficult. Soldiers described the sensation as suffocating, even when the mask functioned properly. Many felt an instinctive panic when wearing one, a psychological response that had to be overcome through discipline and repetition. Yet, for all their flaws, gas masks saved countless lives. Alongside masks, armies developed increasingly sophisticated warning systems. Gas sentries were posted along trench lines, trained to detect unusual smells, sounds, or visual signs. Simple devices such as chemical papers that changed color when exposed to gas were introduced. Animals, particularly canaries and dogs, were sometimes used as early warning systems, reacting quickly to airborne toxins. When gas was detected, alarms rang out. Gongs, horns, rattles shouted warnings. Entire trench networks would erupt into frantic movement as soldiers scrambled to seal themselves against the poison. In these moments, chaos and discipline collided. A single man panicking could cause others to fumble. A faulty alarm could send troops into exhausting false alerts, eroding morale. Gas attacks reshaped battlefield tactics. Commanders learned that gas was most effective when combined with conventional weapons. Artillery barrages would saturate an area with gas shells, forcing defenders into masks. Then, high-explosive shells would follow, collapsing trenches and forcing masked soldiers to dig, fight, and flee under impossible conditions. Infantry assaults would exploit the confusion, attacking troops whose senses were dulled and coordination disrupted. Defenders adapted as well. Trenches were redesigned with gas in mind. Drainage systems were improved to prevent gas from pooling in low areas. Dugouts were equipped with airlocks or makeshift ventilation. Gas-proof doors and curtains were installed in command posts and shelters. Soldiers learned to avoid low ground during alerts and to recognize areas where gas might linger. Still, no defense was perfect. Weather remained a critical factor. Wind direction, temperature, and humidity could determine whether gas drifted harmlessly away or settled into deadly concentrations. Sudden changes could turn an attacker's weapon against his own troops. Numerous incidents occurred in which gas clouds blew back into friendly lines, causing casualties and confusion. These accidents reinforced the sense that gas was an unpredictable and uncontrollable force. The psychological impact of gas warfare cannot be overstated. Unlike shells or bullets, gas attacked invisibly. Soldiers could not see it clearly, could not always smell it, and could not fight it directly. This uncertainty created a constant undercurrent of fear. Veterans later recalled that gas was the one weapon they never truly adapted to, no matter how experienced they became. Medical units struggled to cope with the scale and complexity of gas casualties. Specialized training was introduced for treating chemical injuries. Field hospitals established decontamination procedures, though these were often rudimentary. Clothing had to be removed and isolated, wounds washed repeatedly. Staff worked in protective gear, knowing that a single mistake could expose them as well. Gas warfare blurred the line between frontline and rear areas. Artillery-delivered gas could reach far behind enemy lines, affecting supply depots, headquarters, and medical facilities. Civilians living near the front were also exposed, particularly in regions like Belgium and northern France. Farmers reported crops damaged and livestock killed by lingering chemicals. Entire villages were temporarily abandoned after heavy gas bombardments. Soldiers' personal accounts reveal how deeply gas altered their perception of the war. Diaries describe a constant awareness of breathing, a heightened sensitivity to the air itself. Men wrote of moments when they held their breath instinctively, even without alarms. Some admitted that gas terrified them more than death because of the suffering involved. One British infantryman wrote that artillery might kill you instantly, but gas killed you slowly, or worse, left you alive but broken. Despite everything, soldiers found ways to cope. Dark humor became a common defense mechanism. Nicknames were given to gas masks. Jokes circulated about false alarms and clumsy recruits. These moments of levity, however brief, helped men maintain sanity in an environment designed to strip it away. As the war neared its conclusion in 1918, chemical warfare reached its peak in both scale and sophistication, yet its strategic impact remained limited. Gas could disrupt, injure, and terrify, but it could not achieve decisive breakthroughs on its own. Victory would ultimately come through exhaustion, manpower, and industrial capacity, not poison. When the armistice was signed on November 11, 1918, gas attacks ceased almost overnight.
Soldiers emerged from trenches expecting relief, only to discover that the war's effects would follow them home. The masks were removed, but the damage remained.
When the guns fell silent on the Western Front in November 1918, the war officially ended. But for hundreds of thousands of men who had faced poison gas, peace did not bring relief. Long after the trenches were abandoned and the battlefields reclaimed by grass and silence, the effects of chemical warfare continued to unfold in hospitals, homes, and memories across the world. For many veterans, survival itself became a daily struggle. Men who had been exposed to chlorine or phosgene often returned home with permanently damaged lungs. They suffered from chronic bronchitis, shortness of breath, and recurring infections. Simple tasks such as climbing stairs or walking short distances became exhausting. Some could no longer work in factories or mines, industries that demanded physical endurance. Their lives narrowed, constrained by invisible injuries that few civilians truly understood. Mustard gas survivors faced even harsher realities. Blindness was one of the most devastating outcomes. Thousands of soldiers lost their sight partially or completely, often after weeks of painful deterioration. Eye injuries that seemed minor at first progressed into irreversible damage. Many veterans relied on family members or charitable institutions for the rest of their lives. Others attempted to relearn basic skills, navigating a world that no longer made sense to them. Skin injuries caused by mustard gas often returned years later. Scars reopened, ulcers formed without warning. Some veterans developed cancers linked to their exposure, though medical science of the time struggled to establish clear connections. Official records frequently failed to recognize gas exposure as the cause of long-term illness, leaving many without adequate compensation or support. Psychological wounds proved just as enduring. What would later be understood as post-traumatic stress disorder was widespread among gas warfare veterans. Survivors reported recurring nightmares of suffocation, panic attacks triggered by ordinary smells, and an obsessive fear of enclosed spaces. The sensation of not being able to breathe, of drowning in air, remained etched into their minds. For many, sleep was never again peaceful. Public awareness of chemical warfare's horrors grew in the years following the war. Newspapers published harrowing accounts of gas victims. Photographs of blinded soldiers circulated widely, becoming powerful symbols of modern warfare's cruelty. Gas masks, once tools of survival, became haunting reminders of how far humanity had gone in its pursuit of victory. These images shaped global opinion. Politicians, activists, and veterans themselves demanded that chemical warfare be banned forever. The idea that science had been used so deliberately to inflict suffering horrified a world already traumatized by unprecedented loss. The war had killed millions, but gas had done something different. It had attacked the very essence of life, the act of breathing. In 1925, these efforts culminated in the Geneva Protocol. The protocol prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons in war. Many nations signed it, pledging never again to unleash poison gas on the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed as though the lessons of the First World War had been learned. Gas warfare, so many hoped, would remain a grim relic of the past. But the story did not end there. While the Geneva Protocol banned use, it did not ban production or stockpiling. Nations continued to develop chemical weapons in secret, justifying them as deterrents. Military planners argued that preparedness was necessary in case others violated the agreement. The shadow of gas warfare lingered, quiet but ever present. During the Second World War, major powers largely refrained from using chemical weapons on the battlefield in Europe, in part because of mutual fear of retaliation. Yet chemical agents were still used elsewhere, and the memory of World War I remained a powerful deterrent. Soldiers trained with gas masks once again, haunted by stories passed down from an earlier generation. The legacy of World War I gas warfare extended far beyond military doctrine. It reshaped how humanity viewed war itself.
The conflict had demonstrated that industrial nations could mobilize science not only to defend, but to destroy in ways previously unimaginable. Gas warfare became a symbol of the moral collapse that total war could produce, a warning of what happens when ethical boundaries are abandoned under pressure. Even today, remnants of that era remain buried beneath former battlefields. Unexploded gas shells are still occasionally discovered in France and Belgium, their contents dangerously intact after more than a century. Specialized units are called in to dispose of them, a reminder that the war is not entirely over. The 20 facts revealed throughout this documentary about the development, use, and consequences of poison gas in the First World War form a single, sobering truth. Chemical warfare changed the nature of conflict forever. It did not bring quick victory or decisive advantage. Instead, it introduced a form of suffering that extended far beyond the battlefield and long after the ceasefire. The soldiers who endured gas attacks were not just witnesses to history, they were its victims. Their experiences forced the world to confront uncomfortable questions about progress, morality, and the cost of war. In trying to break a military stalemate, nations crossed a line that many would later swear never to cross again. Yet history warns us that memory alone is not always enough. As you reflect on what you have seen and heard in this video, consider the men who faced the poisoned sky with nothing but fragile masks and fading hope. Their stories remind us that some weapons, once created, can never truly be contained, only feared. If you stayed with us until the end, leave a comment below with the keyword poisoned sky and tell us what you thought of this documentary. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and continue watching the next videos that are appearing on your screen now. Your support helps keep these real stories of war alive and remembered.